Once it's live, I will start sharing. So almost Friday. I silence myself, and then I'm going to share the screen. Before I had a glitch, so if it shuts down, you both are co-hosts, you can admit people. I will come back anyhow. So let's see, can you see my screen?
I think so. I see something
Perfect.
Black and gray.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay.
So welcome everybody once more to the .NET User Group of Zurich event. Today we have a double take event where these days we are hosting like two different talks on the same topic. Today it's the .NET Maui day, and what a better day, because I think like 2 or 3 days ago we had a quite interesting release, right, Gerald?
Absolutely.
Lovely. So first, I'd like to thank you, our sponsors, Offering Solutions, Vibao for Texture, as well as our back in 2019 location, Impact Hub in Zurich, Stanford Group, and then our partners, Azure, Zurich User Group, .NET Central, .NET Switzerland, and Swiss Angular. Thank you so much. Who are we? It's me, it's Pavel, it's Michael, it's Nigel, it's Laurent, Fabian, and Mark. What do? We organize events. What was too fast, from developers to developers, share knowledge, share passion in order to create excitement about technology, networking included, and beer and pizza, at least back in 2019. Hopefully it will come back. You can follow us in Twitter if you don't do that already. Join our meetup group. Probably you have done that already. And tell your peers, help us grow and propose new content and a speaker. We have a call for papers. You can find it on Sessionize. Should add the link around here. And yeah, today what we will have is a special event on .NET Maui. We will have two very special speakers, and after the talk, we will stop the live streaming. After the talk and the questions have been answered, we will stop the live streaming, and we will invite you both, Mark and Gerald, to stay if you want and you have time, and share some insights that in petit comité without the streaming that at all. About Mark, what can I tell about Mark? He's today with us speaking about creating cross-platform applications with .NET Maui. His Twitter handle is Allibone, and you can find him with the same handle in LinkedIn. He's a senior engineer. Okay, one moment, at Ray Technology. He's pretty focused on development on mobile platforms. He is a Microsoft MVP. It's a frequent talk speaker in conferences. So today is going to be pretty interesting. He's also playing with or working with IoT, and he's quite fit and sports addict, as you can see. He's strong. And then we have Gerald. Gerald is going to talk about .NET Maui and Blazor, creating with .NET Maui and Blazor, hybrid mobile, desktop, and web applications. Quite a challenge. His Twitter handle is GF Versluis, and yeah, GF Versluis. I think I got wrong here, the link, but you get it. Regarding Gerald, what can I say? He's building Maui himself. He's a senior software engineer. Correct me if I'm wrong, Gerald. At Microsoft, he's also a frequent speaker. I think he has even his own YouTube channel. So I think today is going to be very interesting session, both of them. And even more because I know that you both are friends. So I think if you stay later, the conversations can be really interesting. So without further ado, I give you the word. Mark, the stage is yours.
Well, thank you. So let's see if... Okay. So, okay, just be warned, I don't really see the chat. I know how it is when I'm in large audiences. I never get up the energy to answer or ask the questions, but please feel free to drop them in the chat and I'll try to have a look at them somewhere. I got no idea where this chat is in Zoom, to be honest. I'm not doing many Zoom calls, But yeah, maybe Jose will be so kind to point them out. Yeah, I forgot my tie today. Sorry about that. But I brought with a nice t-shirt, which is totally cut out of my video stream with using Maui. And yeah, let's get looking into what this Maui stuff is all about. So usually if we would now be in the room, I would ask how many people have already done stuff, maybe with some Xamarin or who are general mobile developers. Yeah, I'll just assume that most of you are interested in doing mobile development. So when we think about .NET Maui, there are some questions that come up because we used to have this Xamarin thing, and we also used to have this Xamarin.Forms thing. And so the question is like, why is there something new? And I think one way that we could put it as engineers is like, well, mistakes were made. So Xamarin.Forms, when it originally came out, which allows us to also write cross-platform UIs, and it had some interesting bits in the architecture. And the thing was, like, when it originally came out, so Xamarin.Forms, it was like thought as a way to make rapid prototyping, so you quickly in a design meeting, you could sit down, you could jot down some interfaces together with the customer, and then you got like a feel for the app, how it could look. And then when you got back into the office and did your serious work, you would then use Xamarin iOS and Xamarin Android as you knew it. And I think Windows 8 was the thing back then, Windows 8.1, I don't know. It was quite a long time ago. Anyhow, people like ignore the part that it's actually just for prototypes, and they started to build real apps. I'm guilty as charged on that one. When I first saw that it came out, I remember it was like, I think a couple of weeks later, we thought, oh, cool, customer needs a new application. We'll use Xamarin.Forms. Everything will be great, apart from the performance, as we found out. And these hinges are like a bit of, like how it was created. So it was not really created to support those things. And as time went on, people wanted to customize Xamarin.Forms. So Xamarin.Forms came with a certain subset of features. And so you started to build custom renderers. If anybody has done any custom renderers, I'm sure you got some mental scars to tell us about how cool that experience was. And so there was just like a bunch of baggage going on with Xamarin.Forms. And as the team looked at, hey, how can we improve this? They thought, well, maybe it would be good to give us a fresh start. And so when we think about .NET Maui, it's not like Xamarin.Forms has been the worst idea ever. It's just like .NET Maui is more like an evolution of Xamarin.Forms. So they have redone the architecture. They didn't implement everything from anew. So a lot of the working stuff, or they took a lot of inspiration, one could also say, from the Xamarin.Forms code base. But the architecture is different. So if you have ever looked at the Xamarin.Forms project, it takes some time to get to know it. And so with the .NET Maui, we will look a bit afterwards into it. It's a bit cleaner. I mean, it's still a huge project, so it's not a hello world that you will just quickly find yourself in and just go, oh, look, here's the program, and this is how it works. So that there are some changes going on there, and but generally it's better architected. It's got a lot of interface parts, like interface injection stuff, which we have also. If you do ASP.NET Core, you will be familiar with those concepts. And one of other goal of the Maui was to make it faster, especially for Android. Android, they had a issue with the performance of how the stuff was rendered or how the UI tree was built up. And with .NET Maui, they made breaking changes in the UI layer to improve that performance. Or if it's not yet super fast, at least it's like the architectural foundation is now in the right spot, because there was a lot of learnings done since Xamarin.Forms was originally created. Those insights, they are now part of what .NET Maui is. Now, .NET Maui, as Xamarin.Forms, is a native way how you can build your applications. Yes.
You have a message in the chat. I think you can click on the chat to say it, but I will read it. It's from Gerald. So he's teasing you, probably, if you are
Again?
calling forms a mistake now, and he's telling you, I thought we were friends.
Okay, sorry, Gerald. Yeah, I didn't mean it that way, Gerald. He's always so he's always so emotional when it comes to forms. Gerald is doing some really great work in improving sort of the forms releases. Maybe if you have seen the previous updates that came from Xamarin.Forms, he's been a great part of those. And so Xamarin.Forms is like really cool. It just has got some architectural pieces which are really hard to change. And if you've got people that are adjourned to something like Xamarin.Forms and you just go breaking willy-nilly stuff, it's not the way how Microsoft makes their products. And so with Maui, what we get is a new approach to this, or an evolved approach to how Xamarin.Forms was done. And what you can see here is the Weather 21 example that the Maui team made. So if you have been following along with the previews, you probably know these screenshots. And what I'm trying to show you here is just when we talk about native applications, I mean, these days, if we want to build a desktop application, we can pick Electron and it will look sort of native, but under the hood, you will see it's mainly HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. And while those tools are very powerful and you can do a lot of stuff, it usually also means you're just that a bit away from the native look and feel of the platform. And the way that Xamarin and now Maui was created in is it embraces those platform features. So if we look at the backspace, you can see there is a Windows app there, and it's got like this windowy look and feel that Microsoft has now designed for. And with that, we can also see where the tab bar is. So the tab bar is on the left. So it looks a bit more desktop-y. It's not a classical mobile application. In the front, we can see the front left, we can see the Android application, and we can also see like the nuances there. Like if you look at the navigation header bar, and if there are any designers in the call, I know you like to have your designs everywhere the same, but Android and iOS are on different platforms that come actually with different design inspirations. And you can see the navigation bar, the text is there on the left. And if you look at the iOS, which is in the top right, you can see the text is in the middle. And it's like these little nuances that really show you if something is like a platform native approach. And this is still what Maui will bring you out of the box. So you've still got a lot of these native platform features that you can leverage. And with that, you get also all the native behavior. So if you think about a button that you're using and you've got someone that has got some sight impairment, they can have a screen reader. And if you just draw your own button or you just make an image and you make it clickable, you will lose a lot of power that is in the platform that will make your application more accessible. So that's one thing why native applications are something really nice and cool to do. Another thing is performance. These platforms, they have a lot of engineers behind them. They really tune those devices for performance. And in the days when we started out with Xamarin.Forms, the true beginning, I mean, these devices, they were really not powerful. If you look now at the devices, sometimes when you look at those speed marks, you could think they might just beat the laptop that you got from your workplace. It's it's a different world, but still, you can sometimes feel if something is more or less snappy. And another thing is, of course, the RAM consumption. I mean, I'm just not a big fan of those Electron apps because I only got 16 gigs of RAM in this machine. And yeah, you open up 3 of them on a browser, and then you got your ID, and suddenly it's a huge struggle who gets the most memory in your machine. So that's to be said, but this is like the introduction of what Maui is. Nonetheless, a question that I always got is, can I do X with C# on Windows? Actually, I never got this question ever because everybody thinks, well, C# is from Microsoft, so obviously I can do everything on Windows with C#. But this question I get ever so often. Can I do with C# on Android, iOS, and Mac? Can I do what I can do with Swift or with Java/Kotlin on the Android platform? And the answer is, since a very long time, and it still will be true for Maui, it's yes. Yes, you can. You can do all the stuff that you want. You can even do more because you can do all the stuff that you can do with Swift or Kotlin But you also got the .NET platform. So with Maui, we get .NET 6. So all the good features of .NET 6 are in there. But we also get the platform features. So if we deploy something for iOS, for example, we get access to Metal, which is a rendering library, 3D rendering library or graphics library from Apple, which allows us to harness that power. So we can also go really platform specific if we want to. And that can be a very good thing. And another thing that we also are allowed to do is use many of our favorite NuGet packages. Now, since we're cross-platform, you'll find NuGet packages that will only run on Windows, and some that will only run maybe on Android or on iOS. So there's some complications to look in there. But generally speaking, a lot of the libraries, they have been adopting .NET Standard 2.0. And in the future, I guess a lot of these mobile libraries, they will be then migrating over to .NET 6. Speaking about this NuGet stuff, let's have a look a bit at the architecture that is going on under the hood when we think about .NET Maui. So this is how it about looks when we think about Maui. So on the top layer, we got the UI framework. So .NET Maui, XAML, we can call it, is you can think of it as Xamarin.Forms, okay? So we got some UI library tools, we got our pages, we got our UI controls, which we can use. So it's very, very similar. But what the .NET Maui also enables us is to do stuff like Blazor hybrid .NET Maui. So stay tuned later on when Gerald will show you how cool that is. It also enables different scenarios, like one thing that has been a playground of one of the .NET Maui team members, and I'm just forgetting his name, and I'm sure Gerald will write in the chat, and I still don't see the chat. Sorry about that. Clancy, something Clancy. So Comet is an interesting new approach. So Comet takes to this MVU style, model view update. You might know MVVM, model view model, or MVC. So it's a new approach how you can write desktop applications and how you update the UI. So it's a lot more event-based updating, and it has got like an update cycle. We could do an entire talk on that. What .NET Maui also enables is it's like a platform. So you could create your own cross-platform rendering application and build it up on top of Maui. So Fabulous is maybe a candidate that will come. Maybe you have heard of Uno, which is also a platform where they base it on WinUI and allow you to write WinUI style XAML and bring it cross-platform. And all of those things, they can actually just still run on .NET Maui. And with .NET Maui, what we get out of the box from day one, like what the team officially from Microsoft supports, is iOS, Android, Windows, and macOS. So if we compare this to Xamarin.Forms, what we get new is before it was only iOS and Android. So the team really, they focused on mobile devices. And what we get now new with Maui is actually we also get a desktop aspect. So we can write Maui applications that will be running on Windows or that will be running on macOS, which I think is quite cool that we get that power. And there's also tooling built into the platform, which allows you to have a bit of a flexible layout. So you can move stuff around. You saw it on the image before that showed you Weather 21. So you can adopt if you're on the desktop or if you're on a mobile device. So you don't have to have your tabs like at the bottom or at the top. You can choose to have different layouts for that. What about different platforms? With Xamarin, what we also had is we actually had support for Linux. There was like a GTK version of that, and it was also available in Xamarin.Forms. Now, this is currently, it was actually never officially supported by Microsoft, and you can still do this. So I just put them on there. So if Linux or web, like if the community feels like we really have to do something here, it would be so cool if I could write my XAML and it then compiles down to WebAssembly or to JavaScript and CSS. It is possible with the architecture. I mean, you can plug in new platforms and reuse them. And that's something I think is a really powerful model. So we can see like right now, team is really focusing on getting out this .NET Maui 1.0, and they're focusing on these platforms that we can see here. But there's nothing like preventing them if there is suddenly a demand that we have to write more Linux applications or more web-based applications with this, and then using the .NET Maui XAML stack for that. So let's compare this quickly to how Xamarin.Forms was built up. I've tried to make here a table, try to be very business-like here because I have a tie in one of my images and also found it, so I have to sneak this one in. So what we see here is on one side, we see the Xamarin.Forms. And as I said before, Xamarin.Forms platforms, iOS and Android, so mainly mobile. And we can also see like minimum framework. So what can we use .NET Maui for? So .NET Maui will be compatible with .NET 6 and onwards. And when we look at Xamarin.Forms, it's .NET Standard 1.0. I know this is not correct. We had these shared library things. They were really fun. You know, those with the two thingies, square thingies that intermatched. I mean, that was fun, especially when you looked at the compile time, which spiked with those. And then we had .NET Standard. And so Xamarin.Forms supported .NET Standard early on. It also has a PLC. I don't know if anyone remembers that, when we had to like cross-inject libraries per platform to give it more, because it was like the least common denominator. And then suddenly everybody said, well, we actually need a file system. That file system is not really given. Anyway, PLC baggage left there, .NET Standard 1.0, and right now Xamarin.Forms supports .NET Standard 2.1. And after that, .NET 5 came, and now we are, I can admit something. I can't. And right now we are now living like in this new world where everything is like 1.NET or .NET 5.0, and with .NET 6 we have an LTS release, which Maui is also targeting. And there are also some nuances down in the platform, like platform-specific implementations. There used to be renderers, custom renderers that we had to implement. Now in .NET Maui, we call them handlers. And I really like this new approach with the handlers. I think they are way easier to grok than the renderers were. When we look at the installations, Xamarin.Forms was a NuGet package, and the iOS and Android parts that were like somehow in Visual Studio, and it was really hard to tell which version you needed and stuff like that. And I think I really like this new workload approach because it makes reasoning way easier if you think about versions and what version do I have to install my dev machine and on the build server and stuff like that. Really like that. And another big change, and we'll see that later on, is this .NET solution architecture. When we think about Xamarin.Forms, when we made project new, we had like 4 projects that it generated. We had the shared one, which was .NET Standard, and then we had the macOS, the Android, and if you were on Windows, you could also have the UWP, but that was, again, not really officially supported by the team. So yeah, you have those. And right now, you only just have one, which is really cool because that means a lot of the work that was so painful, like adding an image, is now way easier. Trust me, this is something really cool. This is something to look forward to. Talking about handlers, let me show you how that actually works. And for that, I'll try to change my screen. So what I got here is the .NET Maui project. How can I bring you away? I can't. And so what we see here is we have the .NET Maui project, and this is the new code base, as you can see. Ignore the failing builds. I mean, this is a development thing, right? This is not the official NuGet version. And if we go into source, then the core, source once more. And here we have the handlers, which I've been talking about. And now let's choose one. Let's choose like the button. And what we can see here is this is like the interface that I was talking about if you want to implement a button, which looks like quite easy to do. So you have to make a new UI button, new platform view, and an image source loader. So don't be fooled by this. This thing inherits from the view handler, and the view handler implements again the element handler, and the element handler is in the top layer. But what I'm trying to tell you here is the really nice thing about handlers is even if there are like multiple interfaces that are now inherited together to get the final handler, it's a lot easier to understand this because once you've understood how handlers are built up and the various subsets, you have understood the concept. Earlier, when you made a native renderer and you made a custom button, then you had to do a custom something else. That custom something else could have been completely different built up, which was, again, huge fun factor to have. And this is something I really like because it just makes these implementations a lot simpler. And if we go back to the button, we can now see how the button is implemented, like specifically for iOS, and how all these features are now overridden, all these functions, so you can make them work. And if we now would want to add a new platform, like if you tomorrow bring out the new operating system that everybody will love, because it just has got that one feature which everybody was missing, even though they didn't know it. What you could do is you could just extend this, all the handlers. I'm not saying it will be easy, but you can do it. You could just extend these handlers and add your own. So one thing that was just released, I think last week, just a few days ago, was the release candidate 2 of Maui. And what the release candidate 2 brought in was actually Tizen. So Tizen is, if you've got a Samsung TV at home, it will probably be running that operating system. And if you also, I don't know if you still can get them, but you used to be able to get mobile phones from Samsung, but also run this Tizen OS. Yeah, so you can see they implemented here the handlers, how this works, and some apples are still missing. But this is how handlers work in .NET Maui. And yeah, actually another cool feature that you can do, I don't know if you've already seen this, whenever you browse a repository in GitHub, you can just do def. And if you're logged in, and then do the two thing, you actually get Visual Studio Code. I'm not going to do this now, because otherwise Joe will be mad when I take away his time. So that was like a quick tour of the source code of the Maui repository. Now, let's go on. So what we saw is a bit how the architecture works, how the modularity is doing, and that's all cool. And you've been all hearing me talking quite a bit now. So what about coding? So let's get started with coding. The good news is, if you're on Windows, it's just the good old experience that you always have. You just create a new project. And if you don't have this yet, what you will need is you will need to install Visual Studio Preview. And in Visual Studio Preview, in the installer, you then just simply tick this box here. This might be an outdated version of that. I think they changed the logo by now. You tick the box with mobile development in the preview, and then, well, even zoomed in a bit. And then what you do is you ensure that Maui preview is selected, and then you get some coffee, because that will maybe take some time. And after that, when you caffeinate it and you think, you can then open up your create new project and start creating a Maui application. So let's have a look how this actually works. And I'll quickly move away from the browser. So I got next to me, I got my Surface Pro 2, which is, whenever I do these web talks, it just overheats, and then the compilation time goes down to the cellar. And I would really like to get rid of you up here. Ooh, I can. Great. Okay, so this is a remote machine that I have. And what we see here is, so I made a little application. I added a few pages. And as you can see, what's really nice now, I can just open out this. I can say, hey, I want to deploy to Android. I got my emulators, or I want to deploy to my Windows machine, or I also could have my simulators or local device. And the remote ones. Local devices is, if you didn't know that, you can actually hook up your iPhone directly to your computer, to your Windows machine, and then you will no longer need a Mac. That's something that's super cool. There are some limitations around it, but generally speaking, all you need is an iPhone. You need an Apple account because of the certificates for signing and stuff like that. And then you can connect it up via USB with your Windows computer and let it run in there. Pretty cool when you just want to do some rapid development. And I've actually also deployed some rather large applications that I was working on it, and it ran quick, smooth, and everything. I was very positively surprised. So I'll quickly click here, start, so you can see how this thing compiles. I'm using Windows. This used to be something I mostly avoided, because Windows also always was a bit hit and miss with UWP on Xamarin.Forms. Sorry, Gerald, if it's the truth. And yeah, so what we get here is we get this very nice application. I will put it over here, and I'll open up the Visual Studio over here. I shouldn't have done this because now I can't see anything. Anyhow, so one other cool thing is what I now have here is I actually also have a live preview when I'm designing something. So this is really cool because if I now go over here and I click a bit, you can actually see there's also an update in the preview that I'm getting from the XAML. And if I now look at this is my main page. We can, of course, also go here and say, I want to change another color. And I want to say, hey, I would like to have a red color. And this is something that's really nice because before I always had like my simulator was either on the other screen. And if I only had one screen or was demoing something, this was like always very hard to do. And now I can just simply go around, change things, change the stroke width, press save, it will be automatically reload it, and now it says me, I just changed something that I cannot do. And this is, I think, another really nice change because before it was always a bit, well, I don't know what I want to do. And you also get now with the XAML live reload, what we also get is the hot reload up here, which is the flame here. And when we activate that, what we can actually also do is we can then start making changes in the code behind, and they will be applied. Now, this hot reload, it's been around now for a few months. You can't do everything with it. So it would be like in my dream world, I could make new project. I could say, hey, hot reload, and I could start programming everything, and the app would just grow, and I would never really have to restart and compile. You can't do that. So there's some changes when you do them in the code. And if you would go down into IL and look how that's all generated, you would see, yeah, it's complicated. So at some points they will just say, okay, this is too complicated to like fuzz it in during runtime. We'll just make a new rebuild and you'll get the features then. But generally speaking, it can really speed up stuff if you just want to try things out. And yeah, so this is what we see here. So there's already some really nice improvements which have technically nothing to do with Maui. I think it's even a different team in Microsoft. So if you find a bug here, please don't blame Gerald, otherwise he will blame me for, yeah. Anyhow, but yeah, it's still preview also, so there's also a bit of a risk there. And yeah, so this is like one of the new things. I think you can see it's quite nice what you can do in here. And I know the designers in here that will go like, Mark, you know, you should never do styles like this. You should do like static resource, bring in the primary thing, and we can do that. So I'll open here quickly the Solution Explorer, and I'll pin it here. And so this is how the new app structure looks. We just have like this one single project. I'll have my platforms in here. So that's really nice. You can see I also got that Tizen, which means I installed the latest release candidate. And we also have, we still have got the app XAML CS, which used to be the starting point of every Xamarin.Forms app. If we look into this, we can see there's not that much going on in here. So stuff is missing in here, right? So the new place where everything starts up is actually here in Maui.program. And if we look at this, what like comes to mind is, or what really looks for me like super familiar is like, think about ASP.NET Core or your console new application. This looks really similar to that, doesn't it? I mean, I even get here like a builder where I can do stuff. And something that I really liked, and which was like a missing feature in Xamarin.Forms. So Xamarin.Forms, you got a ton of stuff out of the box. One thing you didn't get was dependency injection. So we got like view models, we got bindings, we got the commands. A lot of it was built in. There are like some helpers which will allow you to write even less code, but a lot of it was already in there. I mean, if you compare it to WPF, it was way more was already there with Xamarin.Forms. But the thing that was missing was the DI. And technically, I know there was a dependency injection. You just had to put these square brackets on top and then do something, and blah. I didn't like that approach. So I often used a custom dependency injection thing. But what I now get when you look here is we actually can, as with ASP.NET Core, I can go here and I can just say, oh, I would like to add a new service. And if I commented this out, what you can also see is I get, I can add as transient. So that means every time I request a new instance of this or get a new instance, I can also say singleton. So I could also get a singleton. I still have to read up on what scope does, because I know scope, how it works in ASP.NET Core. it doesn't make that much sense for me in a mobile app. Scoped usually is when you make a web request, it will open up this thing only for the one web request and then clear it up again. So yeah, but maybe Gerald can advise me or not. Anyhow, so this is another really cool feature that we get with Maui is depends injection. And I can build this all up in here. And then as you can see, I have now my main page. So this was what we had here. And if we look here into the XAML, which we already did before, some things changed. We now have here Maui. There used to be forms somewhere there. And I think this was used to be like 2014 and now it's 2021. So yeah, that's otherwise it's a lot of it stayed the same. And I think that's also something that the Maui team was looking out for. So while they did do some breaking changes like in the architecture below, you will feel quite at home here. I didn't have a lot of problems getting to know a lot of stuff. And they even added like some really cool things like these borders where you can quickly change stuff and move them around. And sorry, lots. I'm mostly doing macOS and I often hit the Windows button when I want to save. Yes, you may rebuild and change. You can also tick the box there so it doesn't ask you the whole time. That's what I did, but and then your app suddenly goes away. So yeah, this is how you can develop these things. And there's some more stuff. So before I went into the app XAML, and we saw here there's this app shell thing. Now, I don't know, maybe you used shell before in Xamarin.Forms. So they brought over shell and they improved it. So shell is like the new default way how you can do it. Me personally, I once tried shell in Xamarin.Forms and the UX or how the app was built out was not how the shell intentioned to make navigation. So I had to revert that approach then after I found that out. But yeah, so all I'm saying is shell is a new thing. If you haven't tried it out, have a look at it, because the really cool thing is, so the app shell, we can see it over here. And what we can do in here is we can define like the navigation structure, how pages are. And if we got smaller apps, and most mobile apps are quite compact, we can put in here, we can say, oh, I want to have a tab bar. I can also say what texts I want to display. So we can see here, this is the welcome here. So if I go here and I change this, and I think this will also mean I would have to restart it. Let's see if it swallowed it. Oh yeah, didn't even detect it. We can now open up an issue on GitHub, but I'll save that for another time. So yeah, but what we can do in here is we can define how these things are. You will find in the documentations, you can also make these things differently, how they all work. And it's just like, what I really like about this approach is I got like one area to look and I see how my pages are configured. I also got like the routes that I can define, so you can make like also deeper routes and stuff like that. And you can see now the title has changed of the rebuild. So this is also a new thing with shell. So this is now the new default as we want to. Otherwise, if we look at stuff like bindings, they're still pretty much the same. So I can go up to here into my view models. I just took the vanilla stack, so there's no MVVM framework that I'm using here. A lot of the MVVM frameworks you can actually use. So I'm a huge fan of reactive UI. So I've tried out these things. There are like some platforms that were a bit hit and miss, but I mean, it was during the preview phase, so your mileage may vary. And what you can see here is how we, yeah, so I got here like my command, and it evokes this method, count up. And I could now go crazy and rotate it maybe about 180 degrees, and it will still tell me to rebuild. Yeah. It might be the Windows platform that I'm using here, because that also is a bit, it's not .NET per se, it's a lot of AOT stuff going on there when you compile these WinUI things. But yeah, now the .NET bot is jumping around like crazy when we do this. So this is that. Another thing that I just want to point out with the single project thing is the resources location. So you can see we have now got one place, only one, where we have to install like the fonts. And if you've ever used a custom font before in Xamarin.Forms, you had to put that into each platform, and then you had to make your, I think you don't have to do that anymore. You had to, before you had to do like a little thingy-majiggy. So it would work in the .NET Standard part, and then you could use your custom fonts. So now you can just drag and drop in here your fonts, and you can then start using them once you have defined them in your app Xamarin. But you can also see what you get with the default template is where all your styles are. So some of you used to put them in here. So we can see here, the default template also brings you the way how you can make styles. So if you got like your primary and light color and all these contrasts, if you change them here, the style will then adopt. This also needs a rebuild, by the way, because the styles there are not eagerly changed from the XAML preview feature that we get. But yeah, so this is like a quick tour of how the development looks and feels like. I think it's mainly like improvements about developer productivity when I played around with it. It's very little like, oh, this is totally different and who moved my cheese moments. So it's something I really liked when I started to play around with these things. Yeah, a few things that I still wanted to show you is this is the structure that we had. So you can see they're all in one space. So that was quite cool. And if you open up the CS project file, you can see what you have to do is we say use Maui and use the single project thing. So that is like the changes that then come up. And then what you can also see in here is the application title. So it's all in one place. The application ID, so we don't have to configure them anymore at multiple places. And also the application version is now at one place, and it will be just taken care for you during compilation. Another thing that you can see down here is the supported OS platforms. Now, before we used to have these things like natively baked in, and what you can now see is .NET has got now and what that will give you is, that's like a native wrap around the iOS SDK from Apple. So with that, you will get certain features that you will not find on Windows. Same as like when you think about .NET 6 and you make a WinForms application, even though it's .NET 6, it uses traits that are only there on the Windows platform. And this is like the same principle there. So you will never be able to run your iOS application on Windows, even though it's .NET 6, because it's got some platform-specific parts in there, which are missing on Windows. Another thing is the image stuff here. So you can see the app icon, the robot, which is an SVG. So we could have pulled in another app icon and then just rebuild it, and we would have a different app icon. And I could have also changed the platforms around there. Yeah. So as we saw, single project, we still got the multi-targeting features that are in there. So I got the target frameworks at the top, which I then can choose from, and which is also something really cool that we can do there. We can still access platform-specific stuff. So there's like two approaches how we can do that. Some people, they really like partial classes. So you make like myViewModel.Android, myViewModel.iOS, myViewModel.Windows, yada, yada, yada. And then you define that in your CS project and you say, hey, all the CS files that got this pattern, load them when I'm on Android and load the others when I'm there and there. So that's one way how you can do that. If you like split it up into different classes, and you can make them partial. If I would have shown you that before in the handlers, you could have also seen that these handlers are usually partial classes, and the framework will then load the correct handler depending on the platform that you're building for. Another approach they can take is the conditional compilation. So if you make a hashtag if Android or hashtag if Windows and so on, you can then write specific code in there. There's good and bad things to say for both approaches, but this is how you can write code that is platform specific, even though we only just have one project where everything lives in. Another thing that I wanted to show you is, hey, how is it to develop on macOS? And I see I'm a bit tight on time here, so bear with me. So I really like developing my stuff on iOS. One way how we can do it is, where have you gone? It's gone. I lost my Visual Studio for Mac preview. I'll just try to get it up once more. So if you're developing on iOS, there's also Visual Studio for Mac. And there's currently a preview version out there, Visual Studio 2022 for Mac. And if you use the preview version, what you will also get is a support for .NET Maui, but it's also in preview. And so the thing is, like, if you want to develop in an IDE experience, this is the way how you can go. And what I have here is I have the .NET Conf, the podcasting application, which you can download on GitHub. And this is like a bit of a larger application, as you can see. So they did a lot of cool things in here. So they got view models, and they got your services, and you see a bit more resources going on in here. Few more pages. And what I can now do is I can compile this thing, and I hope I will see it. Oh, it's at the back. You can see there's a very nice pop-up message that comes up. That's because this solution is like a multi-facet everything. So there's also like a backend part which you'd have to spin up and put it. We could, I think, and have a look how these things work. Like for example, one thing that I discovered is they have here this builder, and then what they're doing in here is they make like these extensions to like register your view models and stuff like that, so you can see like some tricks how they do it. So these samples there are really cool if you're like getting started and want to see, hey, how do other people build applications? A lot of time applications are closed source, and Microsoft was kind enough here to provide us with some larger examples. Now, the Visual Studio for Mac, it's not on par with Visual Studio for Windows, but if you really want to have an IDE experience, this is one way how you can do it. I'll close this, and I'll close this, and I'll also close this. Another way how you could develop on Mac, you can also develop like this in Windows, is you can use the .NET CLI. So once you got it installed, you can just simply jot in a .NET command, which will then create the project for you. If you've already installed Maui before, be sure to update the templates in here, because otherwise there are some breaking changes that happened along the way. And then what we can do is we can now start up this application in code, which is, I think, really cool, because it just means I don't have to install any fancy tools or anything to get it up and working. And I see here I have my main SAML CS, which was like the starting template that we saw before. And I can actually now go into here, and this is quite the thing to write. And it's like a 50-50 chance that I get it wrong on the first approach. So if I get it right on the first one, I'll be stoked. Yeah, I see. Looking good. So as you can see, I can now use the .NET Build runtime, and I'm starting out the Catalyst application. I could have also started an Android application. This is still very rough edges that you got here, but what I wanted to show you with this is like the possibility, because I know that some people, they are huge fans of .NET code. They develop all of their applications mainly in .NET code, and you can now see this is now possible. If we look back at Xamarin, you could not just use Visual Studio Code and then do something like this. And yeah, so you see it works compiled in here. Yeah, quite a cool thing. Yeah, so that's how you could develop on macOS. Right now, I think the most joy you will find if you are on Windows and use Visual Studio for Windows, because the tooling there is just like a lot more mature than what you will find right now on macOS. But I'm sure that is bound to change very soon. So what about so as I showed you, .NET Maui comes with some really cool tooling changes like C# hot reload, so you can make changes to C# and your application will automatically update. You can use Visual Studio Code for developing, and I'm really hoping that the development experience will be improved there too in the future, because I know that I've also developed some ASP.NET Core stuff using only Visual Studio Code, and it's amazing how much power you get in Visual Studio Code. There are also some new UI frameworks that we'll see. Gerald will show you the .NET Maui Blazor hybrid apps. I know they're not called like that. I think they've got a different name, but I just think it's like a lot easier to remember. I'm just go like, yeah, Maui Blazor hybrid, because also there's like .NET Maui Blazor bindings, something, which is again something totally different. Yeah, and Comet, which is something really cool, which is something I'm looking forward to dive in more in the future. Another thing that has changed is like, what about the Xamarin Essentials? If you don't know Xamarin Essentials, that was like a super handy library, and it was per default in every new Xamarin.Forms application. And Xamarin Essentials is no more. It's gone. It's gone because it's now part of the .NET Maui package. So when you install .NET Maui, you will get all this from the get-go. Another thing that another very cool library I like to use in many projects is the .NET Xamarin Community Toolkit. Xamarin.Forms Community Toolkit, sorry. And that has also been ported over to .NET Maui Community Toolkit. And the team around there has really tried to keep up pace with the Maui. So there's the release candidate 2 was just out a few days ago. And I saw from one of the maintainers, some Gerald guy, that they also just brought out another update for RC2 from .NET Maui. Yeah, it's not an official library from Microsoft, so it's like from the community, by the community, but there are a lot of the Maui developers from Microsoft actually also participating in this, which is really cool because some of the more advanced features are like some really crazy things like Javier. If you've ever seen some little snippets that he sometimes shows on Twitter, he's also contributing to this space here, which I think is really cool. Here's still the URL if you want to look it up later. Now to the big question. Tomorrow, you will walk back into your office and your boss will come and say, hey, Cupcake. I don't know, my boss actually doesn't talk to me like that, but yeah. Anyhow, so he asks you, well, we will be starting this new major mobile project tomorrow. What shall we choose, Mr. Expert? And so you are now in front of this decision, like, do I make new Xamarin.Forms or will I make .NET new Maui? And when I originally had this slide, the decision was very clear. Go with Xamarin.Forms because .NET Maui was then some preview. Now we are up to release candidates. And with release candidates, we got a bit of a different scenario. So the target time frame when .NET Maui will come out is Q2. There seems to be some huge event from Microsoft around Q2. I haven't heard anything official, but could be, just saying, I don't know. I'm not working for Microsoft, just saying educated guess there. So if we are starting today and you know when your launch date is, you might choose .NET Maui today. Release candidate also means that that Microsoft now, if you got like a support contract, you can ask them for support for that, and the breaking changes should be more minimal. At least that's I think what I heard from David Ortino, who's the PM from Maui's talk about in the official Maui podcast. So yeah, I think it's a close thing. I mean, right now, if you think about Xamarin.Forms, you got a lot of tools, a lot of effort has been put into there. You got a lot of libraries that you can still use, and with the when the official release comes around, you might be able to shift. And yeah, release candidate has been put out. There's already another update that has been put out to the release candidate. So yeah, it's going down to finalization, and it's quite soon that this will come out. But if you're a bit more wary about this and just think, well, I might start with Xamarin.Forms, what about migrating my application? And the good news is you can actually migrate your application. So there are the migration steps that you actually have to do. I can put them like on one slide. Remove the Xamarin.Forms NuGet package and the essential package. Add .NET Maui workflows. Enable your CS project to use .NET Maui. Update your namespaces, mainly from this to that. And yeah, maybe in the near future, you can also use the .NET Upgrade Assistant, which has been a tool to migrate like from .NET Framework over to .NET Core. So there have been some changes going on that repository. But as you can see, it's doable. You will not get the single project style that I've showed you before when you start out with .NET Maui. But if you're like a bit unsure, and I understand it when you don't want to start out with a release candidate because it might be a very important application and stuff like that. So yeah, another word of advice, just if you do it, is so you install Maui, you migrate your application, and then you didn't check your NuGet packages that you're using. So as I mentioned before, there are some breaking changes in the way how Xamarin.Forms operates, and yeah, just be sure to check if you use a lot of NuGet packages, are they already migrated? Maui can use .NET, so .NET Standard will be able to run on .NET 6. So it's not that that will not work, but maybe some features, how the library was implemented was like really close knit to how Xamarin.Forms works, and that could then be breaking. But a lot of the libraries that I've been using, like that do not do a lot of UI stuff like that, they actually work really well. So yeah, and if there is no official thing on the GitHub website, reach out to your maintainer, maybe help them to migrate. It's always nice to be part of this cool community that we are moving in. So this brings me actually to the end of this talk, takeaways. And yeah, I think one thing is that you can take away is .NET Maui is an evolution of Xamarin.Forms. So it's not everything has changed. It looks familiar, and that's what they strive out to do. You can also use sort of C# to write UI, stuff like that. So a lot of it is still there. You can actually even use CSS to make your styling if you prefer that approach. But yeah. Different topic to chat very long about with certain people. Yeah, so improved architecture, the new handlers makes it easier. It looks a lot closer to .NET. So as I showed you before with the program, with the startup, and the single project is, I think, a really huge win if you've done those projects in the past where you have to load in a lot of different stuff. There's a huge productivity boost when I played around with this. It was a lot easier to just add in some UI, make some changes there, change out the images, stuff like that. That was really cool when doing that. And the live designer really helped, because when I'm on the train and I'm doing something, I don't always have to still put in the screen somewhere, which I think is a really cool add that they got there. And migrating a Xamarin.Forms app seems to be doable. I'm pretty sure if I would have put in there, it can be easily migrated, someone would have come and told me that his app was such a pain to migrate, and I'm a bad person for pointing it out, but it could be easy. So I put it in braces there. Of course, again, it depends on what your app is doing. And yeah, with that, I come to the end. I already got my formal introduction at the start. I usually don't wear a tie, I promise. It's just something I want to upload it to LinkedIn, and now it's there, and I'm really lazy and not that much on LinkedIn. But yeah, I work for Ray Technology. We're a lot in the industrial IT space. So if you're fancy looking into that, you can always hit me up for that. And we also do mobile stuff like that and web back and stuff. Yeah. You can find me on Twitter at Allibone. I got a website, Allibone. I'm also on a podcast with my good friend Stephen Tevissa, and Gerald left us for his YouTube fame. Yeah, so that's still going on. And I also put in the links down there for the .NET Maui repo. And the other one, I shortened it a bit because it just looks so huge, is actually the official docs from Maui. I didn't show you, but they are heavily improving. So during the preview, they were a bit scarce, but you can now find a lot of information there, how to get going. And if you ever have any questions, what you can do there. And I think I found the chat in the meanwhile. I see there's 11 red. So I'll try to open it. Nah, nothing new. Okay. James Clancy, thank you. Okay. Yeah, so if there are no more questions, I think I'll hand it back to Jose, and then I think Gerald.
Thank you, Mark. And again, the picture with the tie is completely my fault. I just took it from LinkedIn, so you can blame me.
Okay, I'll just put it on your list. It's okay.
Yeah, I know. All right. So thanks a lot, Mark. Awesome talk. And now we will have Gerald. Gerald.
Yes.
Stage is yours.
My gosh, finally, Mark stopped talking. All right, let's see.
I'm not taking that more personally.
Yeah,
I'll unmute my microphone.
You should. No, you just should take it personal. Okay, let me share my screen real quick here. Participants can now see your screen. That's awesome. Okay, so here we are, .NET Maui Blazor. Forget all the stuff about .NET Maui. You don't need that. You want to use .NET Maui Blazor. That's where it's at. And my name, I also got an awesome introduction. So my name is Gerald. I indeed work at the .NET Maui team, so don't take that too seriously. You should also use .NET Maui. You can find me on Twitter. There's my email as well. If you have any questions afterwards, I'm happy to deal with that. But please, I like my questions to be in the public, because a lot of people want to ask me questions. And if it's in the public, then other people can come in. Other people smarter than me maybe have the answers as well. So if you send me an email, it will come onto a big pile of other emails. And you will be stuck waiting for me, and that's something that no one really enjoys. So if you want to ask, do it on Twitter. If it's really something that you want to do more privately, send me an email. Like a couple of people already mentioned, I also do a little bit of a thing on YouTube where I talk about this stuff as well, in a little bit more bite-sized videos. So if that's something that you're interested in, please check out the YouTube link and subscribe to all my videos. So on the agenda for today, I think it's straightforward, and actually Mark has already done some of the work for me, so that is very nice of him. Thank you so much, because it's like .NET Maui Blazor. So the first kind of like obvious question is, what is .NET Maui? Well, we kind of established that. I'm going to go over to a couple of other things in case you kind of like missed what Mark has been saying. Or maybe I explain it just a little bit differently, and then you will understand it if you didn't really understand it. But Mark did a great job. So let's give Mark a round of applause. We didn't really do that, right? So let's do that. He did a great job. So, but I'm just going to go over that really, really quickly. Then, of course, what is Blazor? So we have these two components. What is .NET Maui? What is Blazor? And then the final one, who guessed it? Who can guess it? All right. What's .NET Maui Blazor? We just put them together, and we're going to look what .NET Maui Blazor is. So Mark already said this. Like I said, he did an amazing job. It's the evolution of Xamarin.Forms. And he actually kind of confirmed the theory that I had here, because I always start this talk with like, Xamarin.Forms has been our cross-platform app offering for C#, .NET, for iOS, Android, UWP. We also had kind of like a couple of really unofficial supported platforms who were supported by the community, Tizen, Linux, WPF, macOS. And then I start with a little joke like, yeah, I don't really know if the story is true, but I like to believe it is, because if you look at like this graphic from the website from way back when, like which Xamarin approach is best for you, Xamarin.Forms is best for, and you don't even have to look at like what's listed there under the bullets. You can just look at the screenshot, right? For Xamarin.Forms, it has a couple of boring boxes, some entries, a button, and also the name, Xamarin.Forms. Who came up with that? It's so boring. So, and then the bottom one is Xamarin iOS, Xamarin Android, and suddenly you can do media players, you can do games, you can do maps. So for Xamarin.Forms, it seems that it was, well, if it was intended for prototyping, I didn't want to go that far. Maybe it is. I don't know. I should chat with Mark and see if that's actually the theory that we're working with here. But my kind of theory was like, it was designed for data entry applications, for not really rich applications doing all the things with the maps and etc. But a couple of entries, a button to do kind of like your data entry stuff. That's what it may be intended for, and also that's why the way it was kind of architected way back when, right? But like Mark also said, like people started to doing other things with that. People started to demand other things from it, to do more, and you could do more. But kind of like the architecture wasn't prepared for that. So together with that, the performance kind of like degraded, right? It was really pushing it to the edges, which is amazing that this product could do that, but it never really was intended to do all this. So it's good that we now have the chance to go over to .NET Maui, which stands for .NET Multi-Platform App UI, and we made the P kind of lowercase conveniently because .NET Maui just doesn't have the nice same ring to it. So .NET Maui it is, and with that we have like the unique opportunity to redo all the things, because also with Xamarin.Forms we wanted to stay backwards compatible until forever, eternity. I think if you start like a Xamarin.Forms application at 2.5, we're at 5 now, 2.5, and you keep upgrading it, it should still kind of like work. I think I heard someone who actually did something like that, and it mostly still worked. So that is, really amazing, really admirable, but it's also not great because that really prevents us to take the next step. And with .NET Maui, it's kind of like exact same, but not really. Now it's our cross-platform apps offering for the iOS, Android, Windows, so UWP is gone, and macOS. So macOS kind of like moved to the bigger line. macOS is a first-class citizen now, and so you can see the desktop targets now are our first-class citizens, our first targets as well. So iOS, Android, Windows, and macOS, you can all do that from .NET Maui. And if we go do a little marketing sauce over that, then in one line you could say .NET Maui is the most productive way to develop native apps that perform great on any device that run on Android, iOS, macOS, or Windows from a single code base. So I think Mark kind of like did the high overview. So if we take that a little bit deeper in a more kind of like technical sense right here, let's see what we're going to see here. So this is what you want to do, right? We want to have that app code because that is your code that you want to focus on. That's your $1 million, your $1 billion idea. That's your business logic. That's the stuff that you want to write. And you want to run that on all these devices. But to get from all the app code onto those devices, there is a lot of layers in between, which also make like the whole development very complex. And that is kind of like our jobs now as the .NET Maui team to take all of that away and make it easier for you. But just to understand what's all underneath, it can be good to see all this. So it starts with all the SDKs that are put out there. So by Google, it's Android, the Android SDKs. From Apple, it's iOS and macOS, and Windows, well, that's us as well, right? So that makes it easy. But those are all in like Java, Kotlin, Objective-C, Swift, all those kinds of things. So, that's not great if you want to do it for all these devices. You have to build each app over and over again. So how do we get from there to where we are now? Well, first we need the .NET runtime. That's like where all your .NET code is being run through, right? And if you know a little bit about the history, then for Android, iOS, and macOS, it still uses Mono, which is kind of like an open source implementation of the whole .NET framework. And that is still used to run on all the other platforms, and on Windows, it goes through Core CLR. But that's not really that important because as of .NET 6, we now have a .NET base class library, a BCL, that is used for all of those. So everything goes through that BCL, that is run on the .NET runtime, and that will figure out like where does it need to run through Mono, through Core CLR, doesn't really matter. You don't have to worry about that. So we have this single BCL now, which is great. Then on top of that, we have .NET for Android, .NET for iOS, Mac Catalyst, and WinUI. And .NET for Android, .NET for iOS, you might know them by the name of Xamarin.Android and Xamarin.iOS. That's like the old names. But for the rest, you can still write the apps that are now known as like the traditional Xamarin apps, where you would still write apps with C# and .NET, but not with like the abstraction layer for the UI. And you would write still all the Android namespaces and iOS namespaces and iOS types and that kind of stuff. But now with C# code, and you can still do that. It's kind of like only the name changed from Xamarin to .NET for iOS and whatever. All the namespaces were platform specific anyway, so you can still do that. You don't really need to do anything for that. You just upgrade to .NET 6 and boom, it will work automatically. But what we did for that in the beginning is made bindings for every API on the platform, on the SDKs down at the bottom. We made a C# equivalent, and that kind of like makes the bindings between those two. And that makes it possible to write all the code for those platforms through C# and .NET. And for WinUI, again, that's already C# and .NET, so that's great. Then on top of that, we are creating now .NET Multi-Platform App UI. And that's the abstraction layer where you don't have to worry about any of the underlying stuff. And you can just learn to work with .NET Maui, and you can focus on only your app code. You need to know how to work with .NET Maui, and you can deploy to all the devices down here. And who knows where you can bring it somewhere in the future. Now, I'm going to quickly go over this. I think Mark already did some of this as well. Like if you know the whole history about Xamarin.Forms and whatnot, we already have a lot of controls implemented. We have all this stuff for navigation. So it's not just the UI that is just getting started, right? Like with WinUI, you can see that, which is also kind of a fun challenge because we're building on top of that. They still have to implement some things, and whenever they do, I mean, they were the underlying layer, right? So only whenever they do, we can build on top of that, right? So But because of the whole history, because there was already a lot from Xamarin.Forms, we already have this rich library of controls and all the things. Adaptive layouts is now more important than ever because you can run on desktop and mobile with the different form factors. So a lot of effort went into that. And we have renewed attention for like right to left, sorry, or left to right, whatever you want. And semantic accessibility, because accessibility, that's also something very important to us. And if we make it easier to work with accessibility for you, then we get more accessible apps and everyone wins, right? So that's pretty amazing. Again, I'm not, this talk exists usually not right after a talk that introduces .NET Maui. So there's a little bit of overlap here. So I'm just going to go over this really quick. This is also something that Mark already mentioned, like we now have this single project. So if you know how to work with Xamarin.Forms, this should look pretty familiar. You have this shared project on the top where you want to write all your code. That's where whatever code you write there will be shared across the platforms. And then you have the targets for Android, iOS. And if you have Windows targets and Tizen or whatever, you would have multiple projects even. And for all of those projects, you have to repeat like the resources, the images, and then in the images, you need to resize them to all kinds of resolutions and things for all the scales and whatnot. It's a total mess. Also fonts, you need to duplicate those, the splash screens, well, all the things that are on the slide basically. So what we have now, which is not so much a .NET Maui feature, but it's kind of developed especially for us, so it's still a .NET Maui feature somehow. Is that we now smash that together and we have this single project which uses multi-targeting. So we now have this platforms folder with Android, iOS, Windows, Mac Catalyst is also in there. And you can write your platform-specific code if that's still what you need. You can totally do that. But everything outside of that is like the shared code. And also this means that you can now share all those resources. So the fonts, the images, you can just put them inside of your project, your single project, and we will do all the resizing and whatnot. So you probably best use SVGs as well because they scale to infinity and beyond. So you can just, we are just going to resize all the images to all the sizes that are needed for your app icon, your splash screen, the images inside of your app. So that just works great. But Gerald, how is it going to know how to run which target? How does it know when to run for Android, for Google, for iOS, for whatnot? Well, in this run menu, which might seem a little bit weird, I think if you're like more the traditional .NET developer, you would just have, the configurations here, right? But now you will also have like the different platforms here. So you will now find here the iPhone. It's a bit weird if you see David's iPhone if you're not called David, but maybe it's called a little bit different in your run menu. But you will see the iPhone there. You will see your Pixel phone there. You will see your Windows machine there. And depending on which one you choose, it will know like, hey, I need these bits of code. I will put that together and boom, we're now running on iOS. So that is how it basically knows and doing all the great stuff. Leonard, enter the waiting room. Let's let him come in. So, okay, what do we have more? Well, essentials, I can hold that part because that's what Mark already mentioned. Those are basically all the APIs for all the devices and the sensors and even more for all the platforms that we're supporting as well. Essentials as a name is now kind of like what we refer to, but at some point during the previews, we kind of like divided them up into more logical namespaces. So now it's just APIs inside of .NET and .NET Maui for you to use on all these devices instead of essentials. If you don't really know the history about this, then the essentials name doesn't really make sense. So we decided to get rid of it. And then, of course, we have Blazor Hybrid. That's the thing that we're going to talk about. But this is a little teaser. We'll talk about that later. I have a little demo. I don't really know if that makes sense because it will just be a file new .NET Maui application. Well, let me just quickly do it to refresh your memory, right? Thank you, Gerald. I was busy listening to you. Yeah, I get that a lot. I get that a lot. I'm very distracting. So boom, I'm on my Mac here, but now with the flick of a mouse button, I can just transport to Windows land, basically just like Mark did as well. And I'm now typing my password in a clear box, and I hope that wasn't shared. All right, there we are. So this was for a next demo. Spoiler alert. So let me just quickly whip open a new Visual Studio 2022, and then we create a new project. And here, Mark already also showed you, we have a couple of templates here. So let's just get the Maui one. The Maui Blazor, we'll get to that. I'm just going to do a regular Blazor one for now. Maui app 4 seems like a fantastic name for an app. Let's do that. Click create, and we should see that. And basically what we're going to see is a little upgraded version from the project structure that we just saw in the screenshots. Because now we have the app shell. So if you know about Xamarin.Forms shell, which kind of like is an opinionated way to do your navigation and do a couple of things, that is now the default, because that will just give you a couple of these things for free. For beginning developers, that is probably easier to get started with. And that's kind of the thing, right? Like if I'm talking about this a lot, and I am talking about a lot, I talk a lot in general. But this was kind of like a realization I had at some point, because I don't know who you are, because we didn't really do a show of hands who knows Xamarin and Xamarin.Forms, but I know a lot about Xamarin.Forms. And I looked at everything from that perspective, right? Like, hey, this is Xamarin, this is the new thing for Xamarin.Forms. And we need to be kind of like on par, and else people will be disappointed. And the people coming from Xamarin.Forms might be disappointed, because we will at most have the exact same things as in Xamarin.Forms, plus a couple of new things, right? But there's also this whole new group who is going to see .NET Maui as not the evolution of Xamarin.Forms, but as the new UI framework from Microsoft that coincidentally, also is cross-platform. And that's a pretty cool new perspective, that a lot of new people are coming in, seeing this for the first time and think like, wow, you can do all of this stuff and now cross-platform, which is really amazing. That's a nice way to look at it as well. I don't even know why I told this, but oh yeah, so the app shell. That's like kind of like, for a lot of people, they're going to get started. And although we are trying to make it as easy as possible, there's still a lot of stuff to take in if you're going to do cross-platform development. So basically what our goal is, this is my very personal goal, is to kind of like lower that threshold as much as possible. With things like in the Maui program, you have that generic host builder that very much looks like how you do it on ASP.NET, ASP.NET Core, all of that stuff. If you are a .NET developer coming from somewhere else in the ecosystem, you look at this and you kind of like understand what's going on here, right? The same with App Shell. We're just trying to give you some things that will make it easier to get started with your app. It's a perfectly good thing to use. So definitely go check that out. But that's why it kind of like became the default here. All the rest, like I said, we have the platforms here because at the end of the day, we still need all that metadata for Android, the Android manifest, the info plist for iOS, because, Apple and Google, they're very nice folks, but they're not going to say like, hey, send over an exe and we'll figure out how to run that on iOS. They're not going to do that. So at the end of the day, we still need to have an AAB and an IPA binaries that run on those platforms. So we still need this platform specific stuff. But generally, our kind of mission is to let you touch that as little as possible, and to abstract all of that away, basically. But whenever you do something in this platform specific, you can see, like I just mentioned, this basically takes you like .NET for Android world, and you can suddenly see all these kinds of Android namespaces right here, and activities, which is a Android thing. So here you can start writing your Android code. And if we do the same for iOS, then we see kind of like the opposite. Now we're in iOS land, and we see using Foundation and a bunch of red squigglies, which brings me to the next pro tip. It's kind of like a not really discoverable, but new in Visual Studio is here, this little combo box here at the top, where it now says Android, and that's exactly the reason for all the red squigglies here. I think the tooling kind of needs to catch up, or maybe, it's also hard to kind of like know what target you want to look at. Visual Studio still can't read minds, unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know. But you can here now see all the targets that you have in your project. So if we switch this to iOS, Visual Studio knows like, okay, you want to look at this from the iOS perspective, and now suddenly I understand all the types here. And if I now go back to the activity, now you will see all the red squigglies here, because all this stuff doesn't exist in iOS. So that's kind of like, if you see this, it will still build, it will still run, but it kind of like looks weird, right? So that now you know how to get rid of that. And I mean, it's never been easier to get rid of red squigglies, right? You just boom, check this, and boom, it works. So, okay, I just wanted to talk mostly about the project structure here, and you'll see in a little bit why. So I'm not even gonna run this. I'm gonna keep this instance open, and we'll see why I showed you this in a little bit. All right. So what is Blazor? That was next on the agenda, right? Well, web development without JavaScript. That is kind of like what it is. Boom, I'm flying through the time here. I just, this is all you need to know. I can go, hey, I can go home. Wait, I'm already home. All right, so if you think about single page applications, which, look great, work great in browsers with like the flyout menus and grids and all the rich things that you know from modern day web technology, and you go to the same application on your mobile device, it scales, it's responsive, it's super nice. But if you think of all of these things and you want to also run that with ASP.NET today, you totally can, but you will always be faced with like Angular and React and Vue, and they are all written in JavaScript. Now, I can make all kinds of jokes on JavaScript. In fact, I can do that all day. But if it's JavaScript or some other language, it doesn't really matter. Like if it's a language that you like or you don't like. Whenever you need to switch the context between different languages, it's just not great. It makes you less productive. And thus, at some point, we decided like, hey, we're now going to create Blazor. And that's on top of .NET. You can use C#. You can do all these web things. It runs on the client. It can do all the things that JavaScript can do. And now you don't have to leave the C# language. You don't have to leave the tooling or Visual Studio IDE. It's a consistent ecosystem, and it's stable. It has been what did we celebrate? 20 years, 25 years of .NET. So we've been around for a long time. You know what you can expect. So you can leverage all these things, all these existing skills, and now still build all the single page applications and the web applications. And that is really cool. Where does it all fit in? Like I already said, it's built on top of ASP.NET. So we already have MVC, Razor Pages, single page applications. You can totally do that with all the JavaScript things. On the other side, we have like the backend services, HTTP, REST API, SignalR, which is also a big thing in Blazor, by the way, all kinds of other things. And Blazor fits right in there with all the web UI stuff because, it's very much a UI facing thing. So how does it work? Until now, until I get to the next part. So this is your reality for now. And you're going to be really amazed with that third option. You won't expect it. Is we have Blazor Server. And Blazor Server kind of like is the more traditional approach, if you will, because you're still going to reach out to a server and it's going to send like, hey, Mark clicked on this button, and then it's going to generate the changes for like your UI in the browser. It's going to send that back to your browser, and then it's going to render the changes there. So you still need a browser. And it goes through a SignalR connection, right? So I said it's going to be big on SignalR. So basically that is still a really cool thing. It kind of works and looks the same as exactly as the other option that I'm about to show you. But this really still uses a client server approach. What is really important is the Razor components. You'll see that coming back a couple of times, and you'll hear me mention that a couple of times, and you'll see near the end why that is. And the other approach is Blazor WebAssembly. And with Blazor WebAssembly, you also get that whole Blazor stack inside of the browser. And you suddenly see that it runs on WebAssembly. Now, WebAssembly is not something that we at Microsoft have invented. That is some other technology. And basically what you can do is you can write your compiler to compile to WebAssembly. And suddenly, you can run all these things in the browser. And it's not even just C# or the things that you see here, C# and .NET. You can also do it for Rust or C++, or if you have some language that you invented yourself and you're going to write a compiler that compiles it to WebAssembly, then you can run that in the browser as well. But this is more like your JavaScript approach, where you have .NET, where you have C# inside of the browser. It can update the DOM, the document object model, directly. And also here you can see those Razor components. So this is kind of like the two flavors that we have today with Blazor, how you can use it. Now, whenever you have options, you have pros and cons. So I'm not going to read all of them to you, but I think the kind of like the important ones are the cons that you see near the bottom. So for the Blazor server, you will always have to have a connection, right? You will always have to be online. So, if you want to have an application that runs offline, then this is not the option for you. Also, there is a little bit of a higher UI latency because every change in the UI, every click that you do has to go to the server, has to go back with the changes. It's only doing like the diffs, but still it has to go back and forth. So there's always a little bit of latency. For WebAssembly, there is a larger download size because if you want to run .NET, we just got rid of the .NET framework where you had on the machine to actually learn. We're not about to bring that back. So you have to provide the .NET runtime that down to one. So, you can download all of .NET that you can use with Blazor in 1 megabyte, which is, just a good image. Give it and do over the line. Maybe other countries aren't as blessed with like unlimited data plans and whatnot. You want to be mindful of that, then that's something to keep in mind. And a little bit of slower runtime performance, well, because this all runs on the client, so it's very much dependent on how fast your client machine is, right? So that's something that you suddenly don't really have control over anymore. So like I already said, we now have not just server and WebAssembly, but we also have the hybrid approach. So that's something that I'm going to talk in the next section. But first, let's hop into a little other demo, which is basically showing you what a typical Blazor application looks like for the people who don't know that. So let's bring back Visual Studio 2022 right now and close this solution. And what I'm going to do, maybe I still have one. Do I have one? Blazor app 5. That sounds like a great candidate. So I think this is just a file new Blazor application where you can see a couple of interesting things. So everything runs on Razor pages, right? Let me just close all of this for the spoiler effect. And you can see we have a couple of Razor pages. It all starts with the program CS, of course. This also brings in like the minimal, this is not really minimal API, but this brings all the file scoped namespaces and all that kind of stuff. So you don't really see a namespace even in here. It's all just slammed to the left of the screen. I still have to get used to it. But you can see that, again, here's the host builder, right? So this follows kind of like the same pattern that we just saw for our .NET Maui app, which is really cool. So boom, I know how this works. That's really cool. And from there, we go to kind of like this app.razor. And this app.razor is a special file with a router. And it's like XML formatted. And it gives us a couple of things. It scans these assemblies for the roots, like, you're going to register your pages. So if we go here to a page and we're going to go to the index, we have this little add page slash. So slash is the index, that's going to be the home. And we have this fetch data, which is going to be slash fetch data. And with this app.razor, it's going to scan the assembly, which is, this app.assembly. You can register additional ones if you want to put your pages in another assembly. And it's going to scan for all the pages and things to get those roots out. Now, whenever it's found, it's going to do a little listing, and whenever it's not found, so basically your 404 scenario, is going to show you a little, well, you can do this inline HTML right here. You can provide it with another page if that's what you want, but you can do a couple of these things here. That's kind of like how it bootstraps your Blazor application. Now, like I already said, we have this little index, so that's at the slash. And if we kind of like go line by line here, you can see this. If you know a little bit about HTML, then you probably know that page title is not a HTML thing. It's not HTML5. It's not Web3. Don't worry, you didn't miss anything. This is very much a Razor Blazor thing, because we suddenly don't have all kinds of JavaScript things, right? We want to stay inside of .NET and stay inside of C#. And usually you would kind of like also go out to your HTML page and maybe update the title inside of your layout or whatnot. And this is kind of like a helper in ASP.NET now to set that page title. I'm not even sure if this is something that's very Blazor specific, but just so you know what's going on here. H1, hello world, that's definitely HTML. Welcome to your app. This is just plain text that's going to be outputted as HTML as well. And then you see this survey prompt. You can also recognize like this Blazor, Razor specific stuff because of the syntax highlighting, right? Is it actually visible to everyone? Let me zoom it in maybe a little bit more. So you can see this has a little bit of a different color than the regular HTML tags, right? And this survey prompt also. And this survey prompt, if we go to our shared folder here and we go to our survey prompt, you can see that this is also Razor and also Blazor. And this is actually a Blazor component, a reusable component. Now, right here now, it's in the same project, but you can take this out. You can put it in a separate DLL. You can take that DLL, put that in a NuGet, and you can send it to everyone. And suddenly everyone can implement surveys on their projects, which is not very useful because it comes in the template, but you could if you wanted to. So, but this makes it very powerful because again, we have these components, and again, I'm going to show you later on why that's so important. Actually, this is a bit big. I hope you can still see this because it gets a little confusing else. So you can see this is just another mix of HTML. And here we have this add notation again, add title. And this is kind of like, it might remind you of the old ASP Classic or PHP even, where you can like inline all of your code, because whenever you do this add notation, you can start writing C# behind that. And in this case, it's add title because we could specify, we could specify this title here, right? And that's really handy for the components because what you can do is you can set this property and you can get the parameter attribute on here. And then it will know that, hey, we can set this title from the outside. That makes it really easy for these components to use because now you can suddenly use them as these attributes right here on your component. And it will then automatically pick up that parameter, put that title here at the survey prompt, and suddenly we will see that working. It's giving me red squigglies now because in a previous demo, let me see if I can quickly fix that. What you can also do is take this. Actually, we don't need this. Is take this property and comment all this out. And you can write here this with an add code block, and you can do it all inline here. This does the exact same thing, but what you can also do is say, this is actually the default that comes out of the template, but I personally prefer to have my code in like the code behind. So if you create a new file that is exactly the same name, surveyprompt.razor, but then add .cs, it will function as the code behind, and you can copy the code there. You will have to create a public partial class survey prompt, and you can put all the code in there and it will just work all the same. Or you can do it like this as well. So that's kind of like how this works. Also, like if you're wondering like where the name for the survey component, where that comes from, that's inferred from like your file name. So if you call it surveyprompt.razor, this name has to be the survey prompt. Now, if we quickly run this, if we have a look at how this looks like in the browser, we will actually see a typical single page application in the web, which will have a little menu. It has Bootstrap on board by default, so it's nice and responsive. Everything looks great. So you can see if I collapse it, we get a little flyout menu here. If I make it bigger again, it comes back. And you can see kind of like these things are rendered like pretty quickly, right? It just looks and feels like every single page application out there. The counter just works, click me. Fetch data kind of simulates getting data from
Gerald?
a third-party service, and parses a little bit of JSON and does all that kind of stuff. Actually, the counter is very interesting. That really shows that we're not doing any JavaScript stuff here. So you can just see we have this button, right? We can also mix the things. We have this button, which is HTML, and then suddenly we have that add notation with the on-click again. And now we can refer to a C# method. So here we have this private void increment count, which increments this little variable here, and you can see we don't do anything else, so it automatically picks up that, hey, this variable has changed a value, and we're going to show that in the UI. So that's something that's really nice. There are definitely going to be scenarios where that isn't the case, and then you have, I think, state has changed that you can call manually, and then it will also update the UI for you. That's like more the advanced things, but for kind of like the standard scenarios like this, it will all work very nicely. All right, I think that's all I had to say about this. So let's jump back. And here you can see kind of like it spun up a little web service, of course, to actually show me this thing, right? Why I mentioned that, we'll get to that in a little bit too. Cliffhanger. I see a couple of things in the chat. Is Mark dissing me back? File scope namespaces are quite awesome. Yes, thank you. I think we lost you for a moment. No, I'm still here. I'm still here. Maybe I'm talking to no one. Really dig it. Get up. Copilot. Yeah, that's cool too. Should I just do a demo of that? No, I'm not going to do that. Okay. What next? Demo. Maui. So now the last thing, .NET Maui plus Blazor. The best of both worlds, I would say. And I did this animation in PowerPoint, which is really a lot of work, so I have to show it. Here's the .NET bot coming with all kinds of mobile devices. So with .NET Maui Blazor, you can build cross-platform native apps that run on Windows, macOS, iOS, and Android, which is not entirely coincidentally all the exact platforms that you can run on with .NET Maui. You can use your existing Razor class library. So that is those reusable Razor components that I just mentioned. You can reuse your existing ones. You don't have to change anything. You don't have to recompile. You don't have to do anything. Also, third-party controls that you might have, they are out there for Blazor already. You don't need to do anything. You can just take them, plug them into your application, and it will just work. That's really amazing. And you have full platform device access, which is very important. I will get to that in a little bit as well. So what exactly is Blazor Hybrid? Blazor Hybrid is an extension of Blazor. It's basically the third option that goes with Blazor Server and Blazor WebAssembly, as we've just seen. It's built on top of .NET 6 and .NET Maui, but the really interesting thing is it's not only implemented for .NET Maui, it's also implemented for WPF. It's also implemented for, yes, it's still a thing. It's also implemented for WinForms. So you can use it with all these things, and that really enables a lot of new scenarios that are out there right now. We implemented through a Blazor Web View control to host and render Blazor Web UI. And that's kind of like the important thing. The only thing that is still web about Blazor whenever you run it in these scenarios is the UI. All the other stuff, we can skip WebAssembly. We're already running on the .NET runtime directly. We don't need WebAssembly. We don't need to spin up a kind of like web server inside of our mobile application. We don't need to do all that. We are running all the .NET code straight on the .NET runtime on all the things that we've just seen in that little architecture picture. The only thing kind of like web still about it is the UI. Now, how does it all work? So we have this in XAML. I think I forgot to show you that in like the .NET Maui application, but I'm sure Mark did. We have all this XAML stuff. You can also do it in C# if that's what you want. And we have this Blazor web view, right? So that's in our main page.xaml. That's like our initial page. And there we have this little host page because we need to bridge that to the web, right? So we have the www with the index.html. And inside of that, we have like inside of that root component thing, you can see the selector. I will show you that in code in a little bit. And we just have a app selector, which is an HTML element. And inside of that div, we're going to load our whole Blazor application. And then the component type, there we point to that main .razor in this case. And that's where we find the whole router thing again, right? So that bootstraps our whole Blazor application. That shows us where the routes are for the pages. And that's going to actually show us the things that we want to see. Now, this scenario kind of like shows you a full hybrid app, so full screen basically, where everything is going to be Blazor. But you know, we implemented it as a Blazor web view. You can see it here in the image as well. You can also totally use this somewhere inside of your UI. So you can also make only this little square a Blazor web view and load a Blazor thing in there. So that's totally something that you can do as well. So you know, you kind of like have two approaches where you make the full UI Blazor and you do everything with HTML and CSS if that's what you like, or you turn it around and you implement the kind of like regular native tab view, and each of the tabs has a specific Blazor web view that only loads a couple of well, maybe the one tab loads an actual native view in your app, and the other tab loads the Blazor web view with some Blazor things, because you still want to transform it into something native, or maybe it's not going to happen. Whatever your scenario requires, you can definitely do that with this. So then also some Mythbusters. So Blazor hybrid apps run 100% natively in one process. That's basically what I just said. Like, you know, we don't spin up any web services inside of your app. We don't need to do anything. So there's no HTTP request, no network required, and no browser sandbox. If you, of course, if you want to get data from some kind of third-party service, excuse me, then there's definitely going to be HTTP requests, and there's network required. But if you don't do that, you can totally build a offline application with Blazor Hybrid. And the more important thing is no browser sandbox. So normally, if you run inside of a browser, then thank goodness there is a sandbox, because you don't want to go to the wrong website and suddenly, boom, your hard drive is formatted, or maybe even something worse. But we can totally format your hard drive with .NET Maui Hybrid, which is, formatting the hard drive is maybe not the greatest thing, but there's definitely scenarios there where you want to do more than what is possible in the web with your application, right? Because this is a desktop application. It should behave like one, or a mobile application. So you can do all the things that you can do with a native application as well. And like I already said, the only thing kind of like HTML and web about this is still the UI that is rendered in a web view control. All the rest is, native .NET. So that's really nice. All right, so let's see a demo of that, the main event. I got a little thing right here. So I have two young children, two boys who are, just getting into Lego. I'm not a big Lego fan myself, weirdly enough, because, it usually goes hand in hand. IT, Lego fans, it happens. Me, not so much. But, and now a whole world opened up to me. There's like, I think it's called the Brick Tracker website, where you can track all the sets and how many colors there are in there, how many bricks there are in there, how heavy it is, how it smells. I don't know. They recall all kinds of details. I even found a website where you can like order bricks, like one brick costs a couple of cents. I don't know. So there's a whole world opening up to me. And we're also trying to remodel our house a little bit. So we have to kind of like move our Lego. So I decided to write a little application who can load CSV files from the Brick Tracker website. We'll calculate how big the whole set is, how many boxes you need to move it, and well, that's what I wrote a little thing for. So let's first check out like this Brick Tracker Maui client, and we have this is very interesting. So this is if you would go to File New, I hope this doesn't close my thing straight away. If I would go to File New, you also have like the .NET Maui Blazor app, right? And that's like another template, which has that main page.xaml that we've just seen. So that's this one, the Blazor web view, and that ties it all together, and that brings you to like the main.razor, which has that router. So we just all saw that, right? But kind of like the interesting thing, if you look at like the whole template here, I don't present a lot on Windows, so I'm not sure if this zooming is going to work. Oh, there we go. Then kind of like the interesting thing here is if you look at this template, so this is the .NET Maui Blazor template. You will see that it has like kind of the two templates, but then smashed together, and boom, now we have .NET Maui Blazor. So we can still see like the platforms folder here with the Android, iOS, macOS. You can still do all these kinds of things. But we also have the pages with all the Razor pages. And I think we even got the data with the weather forecast, which was, if you look closely, like the thing that we got in the Blazor template, the data that it was loading. And a www route with some CSS and HTML in that. And the favicon, I still don't know how to pronounce that, favicon. So you have that. That's very important. So they just took these two templates, and now we have all of this. Now, how am I going to escape here? Okay. So we have all of that, and what is kind of like the interesting thing is if we look at like the index.razor. So kind of like the only thing we still have of .NET Maui is like the XAML page, right? And here we can just do all of our Razor things, including the exact same syntax, all of the exact same things that we've just seen in a Blazor application. Now, there's a couple of things here that I'm going to go over in just a little bit, but here is the really important thing. This is the collection summary. Now, again, if you look closely, this is a Blazor component, right? The collection summary. And if we look here, we have this brick summary. So this is an actual separate project, which is a Blazor class library, which has a couple of things. It has some Razor pages. So it has this collection summary, as you can see here. So this is something that we can just plug into this Maui client, and we can just use it here. And again, if we look at this, probably then we should see, is this in the code behind? I'm not sure. Oh, we have this parameter, right? So public brick collection sets, and that makes it possible to kind of like set this set in here, which is even a complex object, right? So we have this brick set collection, which is a complex object of things. We can just put that in here with this attribute, and it will just work all the same. Now, let me actually run this and show you what this does. So here you can already see like we have a couple of like variations, right? If show file picker, then we're going to show this button, and else it's not going to do that. So that's what makes the Blazor reusable component so important, in my opinion, is you still want to make like kind of differences depending on the platform that you're running on. Now we're going to see a mobile app. I'm going to run this on Android whenever this wakes up. For Android, it can take a little while. But if you want to run this on the web, like we're bound to that sandbox again, right? I also have a web target for this, which we'll see in a little bit. And then you can't just, go out to the file system and get those files, right? You really have to push that upload thingy. The user has to select the file, and only then you will have access to that file. So that's like kind of the differences that you have between the platforms. Still, this is maybe not the best example, but there's other examples that you can definitely, like the camera maybe. For a device, you can go straight to the camera because you have all the things, and also for the web browser you would have to go through all these hoops to actually get the permissions for that. So I think you can still definitely define these different paths. So I think it's unlikely that you would have like your entire Blazor project, you're now going to take that and put that in a .NET Maui project. I think it's much more likely that you will have all these components that are reusable, and you're now going to reuse those between both your web application and your kind of like mobile application. So while I was talking, I talked long enough for the app to come up, and you will see kind of like the exact same Blazor template that's here, but now with a fancy, nice logo. And we see this open a file thing, right? So let's click that. And although it might not really show, this is also a very powerful feature that you see here, because we are now going through the Xamarin Essentials, or what was previously Xamarin Essentials, and we're opening the file picker on the device. So we are no longer in that browser sandbox, but more importantly, we can just reach into the platform and use those features. If I wanted to use the camera, I can. If I wanted to use the GPS, I totally can. If I want to, I don't know, what are other things that you want to do on a mobile device? You can do all the things that you can do with a real native app. You will just have to, well, you don't even really have to make that bridge. Essentials does a lot of that. You can actually see here Microsoft.Maui.storage, which is like the new namespace for whatever before it was in Essentials. And you can see that whenever we do show file picker, we have it on pick file, we could just say file picker and we're going to pick a file, right? So that's what's actually happening now. And then I can select a file. I have a Harry Potter set or a Lord of the Rings set. Well, let's just take the Harry Potter one. It's going to say like, hey, there are 17 sets here. Let's analyze, and it's going to do a little bit of magic, and it's going to say like, hey, boom, you have 10,000 pieces, and you're going to need 2 boxes to move that all from one place to the other. So this just works all C#, all Blazor, which is really cool. But for mobile, this is a valid approach, right? We have that file picker. You still don't really have access to the file system as on Windows. But if I now switch this over through this fancy run menu to the Windows machine, and I click deploy, like I didn't change anything. This is the exact same code base for .NET Maui and .NET Maui Blazor. I'm going to now run it on Windows. And that opens up a whole new world, because on Windows, you might have already seen it while I scroll over here, you have the file system watchers. You have much more control over the file system, right? So I could just use file system watchers to make lives on desktop users easier. And you can see I get, again, the exact same thing. So this looks the same pixel to pixel. Because we have Bootstrap and all the web things here, it's still responsive. So even though this is a real Windows application, I can still do this, and we still get all the benefits from a responsive application. But I don't have a button to actually upload something here, because I can now just go here to my Solution Explorer, which is somewhere here. And then I can go to the solution, show that in the File Explorer. And I have the 2 CSVs here. Let's just be adventurous here, take the 2. I go to my Downloads folder, and I paste it here. Whenever I go back to my application, then it doesn't work. Let's try that again. Delete, paste. Oh, come on. Okay, well, what you should have seen here is that it now populates automatically because we have these file system watchers, and we can just watch directly on the Windows file system that actually these files have changed, and whenever they are deleted, that will work as well. So, we have this direct control over the file system. And like I said, like the other fun example is that you can actually, format the whole C drive, and you can do everything that a native application can do, because this is the application, but we just have this other little web sauce over it that you can do here. This works exactly the same. And this little like summary thing that we have here, that's like our shared thing, right? So that's something completely the same. And we have these two sets. Now let's see if it works the other way around. If I delete them, does it pick up on that? Just to prove that it actually works. Yes, that works. Woo! So you see, this is how we can work with this through this, but this is still the same project, right? So what if we do this through the web? Does it then still work? So I have another kind of thing here, which is the BrickSide server. So this is a WebAssembly server page. So if I set that as the starter project and I go run that, then we can see the exact same thing, but now it's running on the browser, running through that browser sandbox and all the things that I've been talking about over and over again here. And suddenly we have to use this choose files, the file upload thing here, but all the functionality works exactly the same. And again, we have our shared component here, and that just works out of the box. We don't need to do anything special for that. So that's what makes this really powerful. But to make it even more cool, like I already mentioned, we are back to, what is it, 1990s, we have a WinForms application. You can use WinForms again with .NET 6. Now, I'll be honest, this is not hooked up, but this is, this is blast from the press, right? It has a designer and super fast. So we have this designer for WinForms, which is really nice. We have our combo box, or whatever, what was this called? This is a Dropbox, drop down. I don't know, but you have this fancy designer, you can do all the things. But this is kind of like the reality, right? We have these fancy sessions with these hip guys called Mark and Gerald with their funny shirts on. But tomorrow after the session, you're going to go back to your office and you're going to have to work on that legacy application, VB, WinForms, all the stuffs. And you're like, yeah, .NET 6 is far, far away from me. But this is like really powerful stuff, because the Blazor web view is also implemented for WinForms, as I mentioned, and also for WPF. So what you can do is if you have this WinForms application, but you're also building a new web-based application in Blazor, but and you want to bring that modernization to your WinForms app to not have to rewrite that whole big old dinosaur in one go, but just replace little bits and pieces, you totally can. So if we run this thing in WinForms, again, this is so fast. I don't know why we didn't just stuck with WinForms, but we have this thing. It doesn't do absolutely nothing. This is not hooked up to anything that I just showed you. But what I did, I used Bing to Google for like free Blazor components, like third-party Blazor components that you can download. They didn't even know .NET Maui Blazor existed or any of this stuff existed. They just were focusing on web Blazor stuff. They built components for that. I just downloaded those, put them inside of a Blazor web view, and here in this analysis tab, you can now suddenly see this little HTML clock, and you can see this Apple Fitness kind of rings, and this is Blazor that you're looking at. This is called Ratson. That's the component vendor, so go look them up. They have some amazing stuff. But I just took those controls, installed them on this WinForms application, and it just shows up. It just works. We don't need to do anything special for that. And that, I think, really makes this powerful to open up scenarios also for legacy applications, to modernize your app, these things. So I think this is really something amazing. Did I already tell you this is amazing? Somehow, I'm sorry for the not so great noises here. Suddenly I have a little bit of a runny nose. I'm getting nervous here from all the Whew. All right, so if you want another cool example, I think Mark mentioned this one already. This is kind of like the showcase that we launched at .NET Conf in 2021. This is like a real life showcase application. And what this does is all the podcasts, but what is really cool if you go look at the source for this is that it has a native Blazor app, a native .NET Maui application. So everything built with native controls. it has that exact same app with .NET Maui Blazor. So they do the exact same thing. It almost looks identical, but now everything is implemented with Blazor, still running on .NET Maui. The website, I think you can go to, actually, I have some time. I have all night. Do you have all night? Let's just find here a little bit about the Dutch news. That's always nice. So if we find here .NET podcasts, they have the actual website running here. You can just go here. This is a Blazor website. So like this is like mocked, right? So the sign in doesn't really do anything. It just takes you boom to the application. But this is actually a Blazor website. And these are actually podcasts. So Mark mentioned that he has a podcast. Well, let's see if it's important enough to be here. No pointers. Ooh, I don't know. Oh my gosh, it's here. Well, isn't that convenient? And you can see like this has all the episodes right here. You can say subscribed. Yeah, I was already subscribed because that's how much of a fan I am. You can actually start listening here. I hope the audio is not hooked up and you are now getting loud noises. So let me maybe turn down the volume if that's the case. And you can actually start listening here. So you can see this starts running. But what is really, really cool, if and the whole application, the whole showcase also includes the server component. So you can deploy all the things here. You have to watch out because it doesn't take the feed here, or maybe I set it up wrong, because just the other month I got like a notice like, hey, your Azure subscription is disabled because you used up all your resources, because I was demoing this on my own instance. So yay, look out for that. But you can totally run all of this yourself. And what is really cool, if you have this set up on the website, on the hosting side, and you have the application run on your device as well, or you go to the same URL, maybe you can actually go to this URL. Should we get really adventurous? Let's do it. So if you go to, let me put this in the chat. If you go to this thing, I'm not sure if this is going to work. This is totally unscripted. I'm going off script. Go here. And what you can do, I'm listening now to no pointers, which you should totally do as well. And I can go to listen together. And I can say, hey, I want to create a new room. What's my name? Well, my name is Gerald. Oops. Where am I typing now? Gerald? Gerald? I want to type here. Why can't I type here? What's going on? This is not the point where I thought my demo would fail here. What's going on? Oh, there we go. Quick before it goes away. So I had Gerald, open room, and now we can listen together. So what this does, it opens a Signal R connection to all of this, and we can listen together. So it kind of like synchronizes the time code that we're actually listening to, and you can also give some responses that will show up on everyone's screen in the form of emojis. So you can click an emoji, and we have flying hearts and thumbs and everything. I'm not sure if this is actually going to work. Now the web server is overloaded as well because of all my typing skills right here. But typically, you would be able to go here. I think it should work with this instance that they're hosting as well. You could go to the listen together, and the room will have a code. And you can actually go there, enter that code, and we can get into this synchronized listening session. So let me see if I can. Oh, no, I can't even create a room. I totally broke this thing. Maybe their Azure instance is now through the spending limit as well. Maybe that's what happened. No, probably not. Okay, one last go. No, nothing. Okay, so this experiment failed. Nice. Well, anyway, this is even if you're not going to run it, like this is a completely cool architecture to look at. If you go to the GitHub thing and look at how all the parts are moving together, there's a very extensive explanation of how it all fits together and how you can actually deploy it for yourself. This is too bad. I thought this was going to work. We could have had a lot of fun. Anyway, it's a cool solution. Go have a look. And you're probably now like, yes, awesome. At least I am, because that's how I am all the time, basically. And you want to, yes, I want to get to do all the things, and you punch a hole in your monitor and you're going to do it. But wait. Before I let you explore on your own, there is a couple of things that I want you to know. So a thing that I get asked then a lot is like, okay, I've seen now Blazor, I've seen Blazor the hybrid, I've seen all the things, I've seen .NET Maui. When or should I use .NET Maui Blazor at all? When or should I use .NET Maui at all? Or when should I use Blazor? And the answer kind of is yes. you should use it all. And it kind of like depends on like what your background is, what your requirements are, what you want to do, right? So why do you want to use one thing or the other? Maybe you're a web developer that's looking into getting into cross-platform development, and you want to do those native apps because you have all these web developer skills, but maybe your boss wants to have that app icon in the store, and you want to have access to that camera and do all kinds of fancy things. With this scenario, you totally can. Or maybe the other way around. Maybe you're a cross-platform developer who loves to work with all the back-end stuff, so with all the cameras, with all the sensors, but you want to have those pixel perfect UIs, and you can totally do that with like Blazor. Maybe you have that existing Blazor application, or maybe you have that legacy application that you want to modernize piece by piece by including some Blazor in it, or maybe just because you can, and you want to sniff in some modern technology and be included in all what's hip and happening. So it all depends on, there's no like one technology better than the other. It all has its place in time. That's basically what I want to say here. Whatever fits your needs, whatever you enjoy working with, that's also very important. You should totally do that. And, just consider the pros and cons of each approach and work with whatever you want to do. Here's a couple of resources. I will probably, I don't know if this will be shared, this for the recording. So maybe take out your camera if that's what you want to do, but you can totally bing up all these things as well. Just use your search engine. And if you can't find something, Jen, just hit me up and I will provide you with the right links, or maybe a video on my YouTube channel, because you didn't forget to subscribe, right? You totally should. Thank you so much for joining. This was basically what I had to tell you for this evening. I hope it was somewhat useful to you. Again, find me on Twitter, email if you have any questions, ask your questions now, do whatever, or forever hold your peace. Thank you so much. Mark is clapping, so I did a great job. Yay.
Thank you very much. That was amazing session.
Thank you.
As well as the one from Mark, of course. And I even think you even reached about 20 times you mentioned Mark. So congratulations.
Mark? Who's Mark?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. So I have to now do the Gerald.
So I see some competition there. So now it's the time you can ask some questions, or otherwise I will stop the stream. Thank you so much. This was really, really awesome. I'm not working now on client technology, I'm mostly on backend, but now I'm tempted to jump back in the client, seeing that. And I'm a pretty good fan of Blazor, and seeing this it's now a lot more awesome.
Yeah, you should.
Yep, some pretty cool stuff.
Yes. All right, seems everything's coming together. So no questions, so I will stop the streaming now, and then you're free to stay. I invite you to stay for, I don't know, some minutes.